Mom's sick, so I came to work in her place." The soft, trembling voice of a 6-year-old girl suddenly echoed through Alessandro Moretti's office, leaving every bodyguard and servant in the room frozen in shock. Dressed in an oversized gray janitor's uniform, the little girl clutched a cleaning rag and a spray bottle tightly in her tiny hands as she looked up at the most powerful mafia boss in the underworld with eyes filled with both fear and determination. No one could understand how a child who should have been in school had managed to make her way into the one room that no one in the entire city dared enter without permission. A few of Alessandro's men stepped forward to escort her out, but Alessandro Moretti quietly walked around his desk and stopped in front of her instead. What he did next not only left everyone in the mansion speechless, but also marked the beginning of a deeply moving story that would change the lives of everyone present forever. Stay with us until the very end, because what happens next is something you will never see coming. Alessandro did not speak right away. He simply looked at her, the hastily braided hair, the smudge of dust on her cheek, the wet sneakers squeaking softly against the walnut floor with every small shift of her weight. She did not look away. She did not fidget. She stood in the middle of a room that had made grown men lower their voices, and she held her cleaning rag and spray bottle the way a soldier might hold a rifle before the first order of the day. Marco Ricci stepped in from the side door, one hand resting on the grip of his sidearm out of pure reflex, the other already lifting in the beginning of an apology. "Boss, we don't know how she got in. It may have been the service entrance in the basement. Someone will lose their job for this." Alessandro raised a single hand. Marco stopped mid-sentence. Then Alessandro did something no one in the Moretti estate had ever seen him do for anyone, not for senators, not for cardinals, not for the men who had once knelt to his father. He lowered himself onto one knee, slowly and without ceremony, until his eyes were level with hers. "What's your name?" "Emma." "How old are you?" 6.5, she said. And the half mattered to her the way it mattered to every child who had ever fought for a fraction of ground. "Have you eaten breakfast?" She shook her head. Alessandro nodded once toward the doorway, where Rosa, the 70-year-old housekeeper who had run this house for 4 decades, was already hurrying up with a hand pressed to her chest. Within 2 minutes, Rosa returned with a cup of warm milk and a small brioche on a porcelain plate. Emma accepted both with 2 careful hands and a whisper of thanks that was almost too soft to hear, then set them down at the corner of the desk without opening either. "I have work to do first." Alessandro stood. He gave one quiet command, and every bodyguard except Marco filed out of the study. The door closed behind them with a soft, expensive click. Only Marco and Rosa remained. "Marco, pull the list of cleaning staff currently out on medical leave. Full name. Condition. Which hospital?" 4 minutes. Marco returned with a folded slip of paper. "Sophia Delgado. Morning shift. 4 years of service at the estate. Admitted 2 days earlier to Mount Sinai for severe pneumonia." Alessandro read the slip twice. Beyond the 3-meter windows, a thin autumn rain had begun to fall over Central Park, the kind of gray New York rain that never quite decided whether it was day or evening. He folded the paper into the inner pocket of his vest and walked over to where Emma stood, her small fingers wrestling with the child-proof cap of the spray bottle her mother had never bothered to remove. He crouched again, this time only halfway, and helped her twist the cap loose without saying so. "May I watch you work, Emma?" She nodded, serious as a priest. Alessandro settled into the leather armchair beside the desk and folded his arms. And for the next 10 quiet minutes, the most powerful crime lord in the New York underworld did nothing at all but watch a 6-year-old girl clean the glass of his private study exactly the way her mother had taught her, with the slow, overlapping strokes of someone who had learned that the world only rewarded work that was done properly, even when no one was watching. Emma worked with a strangeness of precision that did not belong to her age. Each pass of the rag measured exactly the width of her small hand, 30 centimeters give or take, laid down in overlapping strokes. She paused after every 3rd pass to hold the glass up against the lamp on the desk, checking for streaks, then moved to the next panel. She never looked over her shoulder. She never checked to see if she was being praised. Alessandro understood, watching her, that this was not a child playing at an adult's game. This was a child performing her mother's ritual as though it were the only thing keeping her mother alive in the world. Rosa stood at the doorway, her hands folded tight against her apron, her eyes red-rimmed above the crease of her cheeks. She had lived inside the Moretti estate for 40 years. She knew the difference between a spoiled child playing and a child who had learned early how to survive. Emma was the second kind. Rosa recognized the look because she had seen it before in war photographs, in refugee lines, and once, long ago, in a 10-year-old boy who now sat quietly in a leather armchair watching a little girl clean his glass. Marco Ricci stood beside the door, his security report crushed against his ribs by his own folded arm. He had not been able to hand it over. He had not, in fact, thought of it for the last 4 minutes. An entire estate full of men who had learned to solve problems with a raised voice or a raised weapon had gone completely still in the presence of a 6-year-old wiping fingerprints from a window pane. Somewhere in the back of Alessandro's mind, another hallway drifted forward. Palermo, 30 years ago, an old villa outside the city, a boy of 10 standing very still in a marble corridor while his father conducted business he was not supposed to hear. That boy had learned that being noticed was sometimes more dangerous than being forgotten. Alessandro recognized that posture in Emma. The same set of the shoulders, the same careful breath, the same quiet discipline of a child trying not to be trouble to anyone. When she finished, she capped the spray bottle carefully with both hands, rolled the rag into a neat coil, and tied its end into a small square knot the way her mother must have shown her. Only then did she pick up the cup of milk. She drank exactly half, set it down without a sound, and looked up at him. "Mr. Alessandro, I need to go home and wash Mom's uniform before it gets dark. Thank you for letting me work." Alessandro laughed softly, not loudly, just the faintest lift at the corner of his mouth. It was the first time he had laughed in weeks. He stood, took his black overcoat from the back of the armchair, and spoke in a voice no one in this house had ever heard the boss use. "Your mother's uniform is washed here at the estate. Today, though I'd like to drive you to your mother first. Would that be all right?" Emma looked up, her eyes brightened, but the caution of 6 hard years did not leave them. "Mom is far away." "I know. Mount Sinai. I'll drive you myself." She nodded slowly. Marco Ricci, a man who had served Alessandro for 8 years and had never once seen the boss cancel a meeting for anyone, received the order to clear the entire afternoon and bring the Bentley around. For the first time in 8 years, he executed the order without asking why. The charcoal Bentley rolled south down 5th Avenue through the thin autumn rain, its tires whispering against the wet asphalt. Emma sat in the back seat, her legs too short to touch the floor, both small hands still wrapped around the spray bottle and folded rag as though they were an heirloom she had been asked to guard. Alessandro sat beside her, not in the passenger seat up front. It was a small thing. It was also the reason Marco, at the wheel, glanced twice into the rearview mirror, to be sure his eyes were not lying to him. In 8 years, the boss had never once ridden in the back. In 8 years, the boss had never once sat beside anyone at all. Alessandro did not make conversation. He did not fill the space with questions or reassurances. He had learned somewhere in a childhood he rarely returned to that children who had learned to be silent in order to survive did not need to be interrogated. They needed the quiet to feel safe. Emma watched the world move past the window. Rain streaked across the glass. Traffic lights bloomed red, then green. Men and women hurried along the granite sidewalks under black umbrellas that folded in the wind. After a while, she lifted one finger and pointed at a billboard on the side of a passing building, a golden retriever wearing a red bandana, advertising something she could not read. "Mom promised that when she feels better, she'll take me to the park to see the dogs." Alessandro nodded, keeping his voice level. "Then we'll wait for your mother to feel better." The car eased to a stop at the red light where the avenue met 72nd Street. Emma turned her whole body to face him. "Are you Mom's boss?" Alessandro paused for a single beat. "I'm the person who pays your mother's wages. But no one owns your mother. Your mother belongs to herself." Emma considered this the way a child considers a new arithmetic problem, solemn, patient, unwilling to move on until she had understood it properly. "But if Mom is sick and can't come to work, she'll get fired. Mom always says so." Alessandro turned his head fully toward her. In that moment he understood, with a clarity that struck him harder than any negotiation ever had, that this 6-year-old girl had spent every day of her small life inside the shadow of a single sentence her mother had never meant to make heavy. But a child took the world literally. A child had no room in her chest for shades of meaning. "Emma, I am going to make you a promise. Right now, your mother will not be fired. Not today, not next month, not ever, for being sick. Do you believe me?" She looked at him for a long time. She used the eyes children use to weigh adults before deciding whether to trust them carefully, without giving her trust away all at once. At last she nodded. "I believe you." The Bentley turned into the entrance drive of Mount Sinai. The smell of antiseptic reached them even before Marco cut the engine. Emma slid closer along the seat and took hold of a fistful of Alessandro's black overcoat, not to be lifted, not to be carried, only to have something to hold on to. Alessandro did not move his arm away. The two of them walked through the revolving door, past the reception desk, and down the pale green vinyl of the respiratory ward, where behind the closed door of room 412, a woman slept beneath an oxygen mask. entirely unaware that the most powerful crime lord in New York was walking her daughter home to her. Sofia Delgado lay on her side in a shared ward on the 4th floor, the curtain half drawn between her and the empty bed beside her, because her insurance had never stretched far enough for a private room. Her face was gray from 4 days of sleeplessness before the sleep had finally been forced on her. The thin oxygen line looped beneath her nose, an intravenous drip taped carefully to the back of her hand. On the small bedside table sat a slender silver crucifix, a confirmation gift from a grandmother long dead, still polished from the habit of touching it, and a black notebook packed edge to edge, with a work schedule written in her tight, even hand. She stirred at the soft click of the door. It took her 3 seconds to place the man standing in the doorway in a black wool overcoat. It took her 3 more to recognize the little girl gripping the hem of his coat. Emma. Her voice broke on the name. Oh God, Emma. She tried to sit up. The monitor beside her chirped a warning. Alessandro crossed the room in 3 quick steps and rested one hand gently at her shoulder to keep her down. Miss Delgado, please, don't get up. Nothing bad has happened. Her eyes moved from Alessandro to Emma, to the spray bottle still in her daughter's small hand. Understanding arrived in a single breath, and the understanding was worse than the fever had been. Emma, what did you do? You were not supposed to leave Miss Thui's apartment. You were not supposed to Mr. Moretti. I am so terribly sorry. The babysitter promised me. I will move her out of that arrangement today. This will never happen again. I swear to you, Miss Delgado. He said her name the way a man might lay silk across a wound so softly that Marco, standing out in the corridor with his hands folded behind his back, heard a voice he had never heard the boss use in 8 years. You are not at fault. Neither is your daughter. Emma climbed carefully onto the edge of the mattress, mindful of the oxygen tube, and folded herself into her mother's arms. I went to work for you, Mommy, so you wouldn't get fired. Sophia pulled her daughter against her chest. The oxygen line swayed. The monitor kept chirping its polite reminder that her pulse had climbed, and she began to cry, not the tears of a woman who had lost something, but the tears of a woman who had just discovered, against every quiet expectation of the last 6 years, that the world had not entirely forgotten her. Alessandro took a single step back. He stood at the distance he had learned was the right distance for a moment that did not belong to him. He looked at the silver crucifix on the table, old, thin, polished by daily touch. He looked at the black notebook, open to a page where the workday had been sliced into 15-minute blocks, including the precise window she used each afternoon to walk to Emma's school. He looked at the untouched lunchbox beside the notebook, wrapped in a plastic bag knotted twice. All of it told him the same story. This woman had lived every day of the last 6 years as an army of one. When Sophia finally regained her composure, she wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist and forced her voice into something steadier. Mr. Moretti, I am not asking you for anything, but I need you to know. Before she could finish, a firm knock sounded at the door. The nurse stood at the door with an apologetic angle to her shoulders. Miss Delgado, I'm sorry to interrupt. There's a man at the front desk downstairs. He says he's the biological father of your daughter. He says he's brought an attorney with him. How would you like me to respond? Sophia went white. Emma was too young to understand the sentence, but not too young to read the air in the room. Her small hand closed tighter around her mother's fingers. Alessandro moved to the door and lifted his chin once toward Marco, who was already standing in the corridor with the stillness of a man who had heard everything. Miss Delgado, stay here with Emma. I'll handle it downstairs. Sophia opened her mouth to protest, but when she met Alessandro's eyes, she understood that this was not a man stepping in front of her. This was a man standing between her and something else. She nodded. Before he could turn to go, she spoke again, quickly, as though afraid of losing the only chance she might ever have to say it. Before you go down, there is something I need you to know about me, so that you don't have to hear it from him, or from anyone else. She began to speak. The words came out the way payment on an old debt is finally counted out, coin by coin, without embellishment. She had once been a junior at Columbia University, an architecture major on a full Rodriguez Foundation scholarship. She had met a man named Daniel Price in a small cafe in the East Village when she was 21, and for 6 months she had believed he was the answer to the question every young woman quietly asks herself. Then she had become pregnant. Daniel had disappeared in the middle of one night, leaving only a note taped to the bathroom mirror. 4 words. No more. Not for me now. Her parents had given her the choice. A certain kind of family gives its daughters end the pregnancy, or lose her home. She had chosen Emma. She had chosen Emma every day since. 1 shift at a time. 1 paycheck at a time. 1 3-hour night of sleep at a time. She had never once received $1 of child support. She had not looked for him. He had not looked for her. Until this afternoon. Alessandro listened without interrupting. When she finished, he answered in a quiet, level voice. Miss Delgado, your position is secure not because I am doing you a favor, but because an organization that cannot hold a job for someone recovering from pneumonia does not deserve to call itself decent. Your medical costs were settled this afternoon through the Moretti Family Charitable Trust. You will not find my name on any of the paperwork, and you do not owe me anything for it. That last part matters. Sophia opened her mouth. No sound came. Alessandro did not wait for one. He turned toward the door. As for the man downstairs, leave him to me. After 6 years of silence, he does not get to choose the hour he comes back. He stepped into the corridor, motioned Marco to walk with him, and the two men started down the long, pale green hall toward the elevator, one of them buttoning his black overcoat, the other loosening the cuff of his suit jacket in the small, ancient gesture of a man preparing for a conversation he intended to end quickly. Behind them, in the shared ward, Sophia bent her forehead against her daughter's hair and held on the way a woman holds on when she has been running for 6 years and someone has finally told her she can stop for a moment. The ground floor lobby of Mount Sinai smelled of hand sanitizer and wet coats. Daniel Price stood beside the reception desk in a coat that was new but still creased at the shoulders from the factory folds, and shoes that had been polished that morning but were worn thin at the heels. Beside him stood a middle-aged man in a gray suit, Marcus Grayson, an attorney the private banks of Manhattan knew by a quieter name, the paper cleaner. Alessandro stepped out of the elevator with Marco a half-pace behind him. He did not need to introduce himself. The whole hospital had known who had arrived from the moment the Bentley had stopped at the curb. Grayson produced a courtroom smile. Mr. Moretti, an honor. We have a few legal matters we'd like to discuss privately concerning my client's rights to his biological daughter. Alessandro looked at Daniel Price. Only once. The other man did not manage to look back. It was the flinch of a man who had walked into a room where his weight did not carry. If you have legal matters, Alessandro said, his voice even, you may send them through my counsel, Aldo Bianchi. The address is on the Moretti Holdings Company page. Grayson slid a business card across the polished counter between them. You may prefer to keep this out of the news pages. New York media takes an unfortunate interest in powerful men who quietly pay for the medical care of unmarried female employees, especially when the employee in question has a young daughter. Alessandro took the card without looking down at it. He slipped it into the inner pocket of his vest. Good afternoon, gentlemen. He turned. Marco escorted Daniel and Grayson out through the sliding doors of the main entrance with the icy politeness of a man who had once seen an ambassador removed from a private club. Neither man spoke on the way out. Daniel's shoulders had drawn in slightly, the shoulders of a man who had rehearsed a scene at home in a mirror and had not gotten the response he had prepared for. In the car on the way back to the estate, Emma had fallen asleep on Sophia's shoulder after the attending physician had signed off on a longer rest window. Alessandro sat in the front seat beside Marco, rather than in the back. He did not speak for the first 15 minutes. Marco had learned a long time ago that when the boss was silent for that long, it was not a promising sign for someone. Boss? Aldo Bianchi, 36 hours. I want a full file on Daniel Price. Every year, every account, every change of address, every visit to a rehab clinic. Not 48, 36. Marco nodded. And Miss Delgado? And Emma? Alessandro turned to watch Manhattan slide past the window. Late autumn light lay flat and gold across the granite facades of Madison Avenue, and the rain had softened to a mist. Move her shifts to the morning rotation once she's discharged. Don't raise her wages, yet she'll notice, and she'll find it insulting. Only the shift change. And I want Rosa to prepare the small guest suite on the 3rd floor of the East Wing for the two of them, should they ever need it. It is not to be pressed, only offered. He paused, still watching the passing city. As for Daniel Price, he's just walked into a war he does not yet understand, he's declared, and he does not know who he's declared it against. 3 weeks passed. Sophia was discharged on a Tuesday morning under a low, colorless sky. She refused the offer of the guest suite gently, without insult. I need Emma to remember our apartment in Astoria. If she grows up inside the Moretti estate, she will think this is what the world looks like by default. I don't want her to forget where we came from. Alessandro did not argue. He only made sure Marco drove Emma to school each morning on the days he was not needed elsewhere, and that Sophia was shifted permanently onto the morning rotation from the 2nd week onward. She worked from 7 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. She had time to walk to Emma's public school and pick up her daughter before dark. Rosa began packing a warm lunchbox for the two of them every afternoon without being asked. Sophia had thanked her once. After that, she simply accepted the box with a quiet smile and a small tilt of her head, and Rosa understood that this was the closest a woman like Sophia would come to letting the world help her. Other small things began to appear. A warm cup of coffee on Sophia's cleaning cart each morning, always an unsweetened latte, the drink she took and had never told a soul she preferred, a protein bar in the pocket of her apron, a hardcover copy of a Roald Dahl novel tucked into her locker with a note in careful block letters. For Emma, no need to return. Sophia said nothing for the first week. She turned the coffee cup slowly in her palm each morning as though deciding, one more time, whether to trust it. By the end of the second week, she folded a small piece of paper once and slid it under the stapler on Alessandro's desk, where only he would find it. "Thank you for looking after us." Beside it, in the wobbly, uneven print of a 6-year-old who had clearly waited until her mother wasn't watching, Emma had added her own line on a yellow sticky note. "You should smile more." Alessandro read both twice. Then he folded them together and slid them into his wallet, behind his driver's license, where they would stay. That evening he stood alone at the window of his study, watching Central Park settle into darkness. Rosa carried up a small cup of chamomile tea he had not asked for. She did not speak. She had lived inside the Moretti estate for 40 years, and she knew the difference between a moment of softness and a real change. This, she thought, was a real change. The file on Daniel Price had reached Alessandro's desk exactly 24 hours after the meeting at the hospital. Aldo Bianchi had moved faster than requested, not because Alessandro had pressed him, but because Aldo himself had been offended by what the file revealed. 5 years without a single support payment, 3 changes of address, 2 dismissals for petty theft, 1 arrest for driving under the influence, not a single contact with Emma in 6 years, no birthday card, no phone call, no photograph. Somewhere else in the city, however, Daniel Price was reading a different file one Marcus Grayson had just purchased from a former financial reporter, a file detailed with shell companies, private trusts, and every charitable fund that bore the Moretti name. The Moretti estate was an organization of 40 people in service, and 40 people in service noticed everything. Gossip moved through the kitchens and the laundry rooms as if it had legs of its own. "The boss and the housekeeper," they said, as though it were a tabloid headline instead of 2 adults quietly learning how to be decent to each other. Marco reported it to Alessandro without inflection. 3 of the cooks and 2 of the night guards. "They are talking." Alessandro did not react sharply. He did not gather the staff to defend himself. He did not distance himself from Sophia to quiet the whispers that would have been its own kind of cruelty. Instead, he called Rosa, Aldo Bianchi, and the estate's internal counsel Camille Voss into the second-floor library. The 3 of them spent an entire afternoon working through every policy protecting female employees on the estate. Every safeguard around Sophia's position, her wages, her right to refuse anything at all was reviewed, formalized, and entered into the record in a way no rumor could shake. Camille suggested one further measure. A written raise for Sophia, not because of any relationship, but because she had worked 4 years without a single late shift. Alessandro agreed, but he asked that the raise be issued as part of a wider round of promotions covering every senior domestic employee who met the same criteria, so that no one could point a finger. In public, he treated Sophia with the measured respect he gave to any employee. No favor where anyone could see it, no apology for kindness where no one could. Marco Ricci had been skeptical at first. He had served Alessandro for 8 years, and he had never seen the boss take an interest in anyone in this way. But as Marco watched Sophia work the way she never paused to expect different treatment, the way she refused to let Rosa carry a tray for her, the way she counted out the exact fare and coins for the taxi driver, rather than accept a free ride home, he began to understand that this woman was not a fortune seeker. She was the exact opposite of one. He began quietly to shut down the worst of the conversations in the guardhouse. Not with threats, with questions. How many shifts has she missed in 4 years? How many favors has she ever asked of anyone in this house? The answer to both, without exception, was none. The gossip did not disappear. Gossip never disappears. But it softened. In the meantime, Emma began coming to the estate on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons after school. Her mother collected her at the end of the shift. Rosa taught her how to fold linen napkins the Italian way, into small, even peaks. The head chef gave her small pieces of dough to shape into practice cannoli shells that the kitchen never actually fried but that Emma took very seriously anyway. Emma sat at the small round side table in Alessandro's study, doing her homework as quietly as a kitten. Alessandro noticed, without quite deciding to, that he had begun rearranging his meetings around those 2 afternoons a week. One Thursday, Emma climbed up onto the leather armchair across from his desk, handed him a spelling worksheet that needed a parent's signature, and asked the question she had clearly been turning over all week. Did you ever have a dad? Alessandro laid his pen down. He looked at her for a long moment, a 6.5-year-old girl seated in an $8,000 leather armchair, her legs swinging because they did not reach the floor, waiting for an answer with the serious patience that only children possess. I did, he said. But my father was not the kind of father you're picturing. Emma nodded, as though she had guessed as much. She had learned early from her own mother that fathers were not something every child was given, and that sometimes the answer to a question about them did not need to come with details. And your mom? Alessandro was quiet for a moment. He did not speak of his mother to anyone, not to Marco, not to Rosa, not to the old Italian priest who took his confession at the small church off 68th Street. But he understood that Emma was not asking to pry. She was asking because she was trying to understand the man grading her spelling worksheet. My mother's name was Elena. She died when I was 10. She was very kind. She loved magnolia flowers and Italian opera. She made the best biscotti I have ever tasted. Did she have a ring? Alessandro paused. It was not a random question. But coming from a 6-year-old, it was not a strategy either. It was only curiosity. He opened the top drawer of the desk where he kept the key to his personal safe. He stood, presented, walked to the small vault behind the Caravaggio hanging on the far wall, and turned the dial. He drew out a small olive wood box. He returned to the desk and set it in front of Emma. Would you like to see it? Emma nodded, solemn. Alessandro lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of dark velvet worn thin at the corners, was a single emerald surrounded by small diamonds, the only real inheritance his mother had left him, the ring she had worn at her own wedding, the ring he had never once placed on the finger of another human being. Emma looked at the ring with round eyes, but she did not reach out to touch it, and Alessandro noticed, and Alessandro remembered. It's very pretty, she said. My mom would like this color. My mom says green is the color of hope. Alessandro did not answer. He closed the lid carefully. He had not given it to anyone. He simply returned it to the safe, but the moment had been planted in the room like a seed, and he knew it. The door opened softly. Sophia stepped in, her apron already off, a gray wool coat folded across her arm for Emma. She took in the sight of Alessandro folding her daughter's spelling worksheet in half, and something in her face eased. Emma, time to go. Sweetheart, Alessandro stood. Miss Delgado, Sophia. May I ask you something? This coming Sunday afternoon, would you and Emma consider joining me for lunch here at the estate? Not as staff, as guests. Sophia paused for a single beat. It was the moment she had been both waiting for and quietly afraid of. She glanced at Emma, who was already nodding with enthusiastic little bounces of her chin. Then Sophia nodded too. Yes. We'll come. Rosa, passing in the hallway with a tea tray, hid a smile as she went. Downstairs, at the same moment, Marco Ricci was answering a call from the front gate security post. A thick manila envelope had just been left at the door of the estate by an unmarked courier. No postage, no return address. The manila envelope was carried up to Alessandro's study within 5 minutes. Marco set it on the desk without a word. Both of them already knew who had sent it, before either of them had opened it. Alessandro slit the seal with the silver letter opener he kept beside the ink blotter. Inside was a stack of paper roughly 15 pages thick, a draft titled, in careful legal font, Non-Disclosure and Comprehensive Settlement Agreement, along with a fresh business card from Marcus Grayson and a pencil-marked cover memo. Alessandro read slowly. His expression did not change. Daniel Price was demanding a wire transfer of $1.5 million into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, in exchange for his silence regarding an alleged inappropriate relationship between the head of the Moretti household and a female member of its cleaning staff. Attached at the back of the packet was a second draft not yet filed of a full custody petition for Emma, ready to be lodged with the Manhattan Family Court the moment the first agreement was refused. It was a 2-part trap. Pay, or lose your daughter. Across the top of Grayson's business card, in slanted handwriting, we await your reply within 7 days. Alessandro finished. He closed the envelope. He picked up the internal phone. Aldo. My study. Now. While he waited, he did not send for Sophia. He needed to finish thinking before she knew. But when Aldo Bianchi stepped through the door and Alessandro handed him the envelope, Marco half turned back from the doorway. Boss, Miss Delgado is asking to come up. Rosa says she saw Marco carrying an envelope up the stairs. Alessandro exhaled through his nose. This woman missed nothing. Sophia walked in a moment later. Her apron was off, and her hands were locked tightly together in front of her. What is it? Don't tell me it's nothing. Marco wouldn't meet my eyes when he passed me in the hallway. Alessandro did not pretend. He handed her the envelope. She read the first 5 pages. Her hands began to shake, not with fear, but with anger. The rigid, quiet anger of a woman who had spent 6 years arranging her life so that she would never have to beg anyone for anything, and who was now looking at her daughter's name written into a document as if she were a thing to be bought and sold. "I don't want you to pay him a single cent," she said. "Not to protect me, not to protect Emma, not for any reason at all. If you pay even $1, he'll come back, and come back, and come back. Until Emma is old enough to understand that her mother once paid money to make her father disappear." Alessandro looked up. "I have no intention of paying." Aldo Bianchi smiled dry, thin, entirely without warmth. "Will reply through counsel within 24 hours. All negotiation refused. On record. And I'll include a note that if Mr. Grayson continues down this road, we will file a formal complaint with the New York State Bar's Committee on Professional Ethics, citing coordinated extortion." Sophia nodded slowly, but her eyes had not left Alessandro's face. "But if he pivots to the custody petition, I will be the one in that courtroom, won't I?" Alessandro nodded. "Yes, I can pay for the finest attorney in New York. I can arrange everything. But the final word, you are her mother. The word is yours." Sophia drew in a single breath. "Then let him file. I chose her 6 years ago. I will choose her again in front of any judge in this city." 4 days later, Sophia had just finished her morning shift and was stepping out of the service entrance at the back of the estate to catch the crosstown bus home to Astoria. A middle-aged man in a brown overcoat was waiting for her on the sidewalk. "Miss Sophia Delgado?" She stopped. Her instincts had already sounded the alarm before her mind caught up. "Yes." He pressed a thick envelope into her hand. "Family court summons. Have a good afternoon." Then he walked away. Sophia stood on the sidewalk for 5 minutes. She did not open the envelope. She only stood. The bus arrived. She boarded still without opening it. She rode the length of the Queensboro Bridge with the packet flat on her lap, and both palms pressed against it, as though holding it down would keep it from being real. At home, she collected Emma from Miss Toohey, the retired babysitter on the floor above, who had raised 3 children of her own, and adored Emma without measure. She fed her daughter dinner. She ran the bath and washed her hair. She read 1 chapter of the Roald Dahl novel Alessandro had left in her locker, then kissed the top of Emma's head and turned out the lamp. Only then did she open the envelope. She read it twice before she understood that none of it was true, and all of it was dangerous anyway. Daniel Price was seeking emergency full custody of Emma. He alleged financial instability despite the fact that Sophia carried $4,000 in a savings account and owed no one a single cent. He alleged that her hospitalization proved she was physically and mentally unfit to parent, despite Mount Sinai's clear discharge summary confirming a full recovery. He alleged that Emma was living in an unsupervised, chaotic environment, exposed to persons of questionable organized affiliation, a phrase whose target could not have been more transparent. Truth had never been the point. A judge only had to wonder. Sophia did not cry. She had learned long ago that tears solved nothing with men like Daniel. She sat at the small kitchen table, looked at the envelope, and understood one thing very clearly. She needed help. Not rescue. Help. There was a difference. She called Alessandro at 11 o'clock at night. He filed. Alessandro did not ask a single question. "I'm on my way. Don't go anywhere." 30 minutes later, the Bentley pulled up in front of an old brick 4-story walk-up in Astoria. Alessandro climbed the 4 flights of narrow stairs without slowing. Sophia opened the door with the envelope still in her hand. She waved him in with a small nod. The apartment was small. It was spotlessly clean. 1 combined living room and kitchen, 1 shared bedroom for mother and daughter, 1 bathroom. Emma's crayon drawings were taped in a bright grid across the refrigerator door. A single small pot of basil sat on the windowsill. Alessandro sat down on the old armchair in the living room, as though it were the most natural seat in the world. Sophia handed him the envelope. He read for 5 minutes. Then he looked up. "He doesn't want Emma. You were right from the beginning. He wants you frightened enough to make me pay him to disappear. I know. This is not going to happen to you. Not like this." Sophia looked at him exhausted, unconvinced. She had learned long ago not to trust promises that sounded too certain. Alessandro stood to leave, but at the door he stopped, as though there were something he needed to say that could not wait until morning. "Sophia, there is something I need you to know right now, before I leave this apartment." Alessandro spoke slowly, the way a man selects each word from a shelf he has never opened before. "There is a name. Only one. If I make the call, Daniel Price will be gone before sunrise. No trace, no lawsuit, no questions from the police. That is one of the things I can do, because of who I am, because of the men I have around me, because of the name my father spent his life building. I need you to know that I can do it, before you decide what you want me to do." Sophia looked at him for a long time. She was not shocked. She had already guessed. But hearing him say it aloud, without decoration, made the moment heavier than she had prepared for. She lowered herself into the old armchair across from him. She rested her hands on the small side table between them. The little kitchen lamp cast a soft yellow light across her fingers, the same hands that had held a cleaning rag for the last 7 years. "You are not going to do that. Not because you can't, because you shouldn't." Alessandro did not answer. Sophia went on. "Emma is going to ask about her father one day. Not this year, not next year, but one day. And I want to be able to look her in the eyes and tell her that we won with the truth. Not in the dark. If you make Daniel disappear, we don't win. We only buy time, and she will grow up inside a truth she is not allowed to know. And that will slowly kill something in her, even though she won't know why." Power had always been the language he spoke fluently. Tonight, in a small apartment in Astoria that smelled of basil and chamomile tea, he was being asked to speak a language he had never learned. The language of a woman who believed the law could still hold her daughter's father accountable, even when she loved a man who could make him disappear before sunrise. Alessandro lowered his head. It was a gesture no one inside the Moretti estate had seen him make in 12 years. "All right, nothing outside a courtroom, I promise." Sophia nodded. Then, after a small silence, she placed her hand over his on the little side table the first time she had reached for him first. A short, quiet squeeze. "Thank you, for all of it. But especially for this." Alessandro did not pull his hand away. He also did not close his fingers around hers. He only left his hand where it was long enough for both of them to understand that something had just been agreed between them without needing to be spoken. Then he stood to go. At the door, he paused. "Sophia, I will call Aldo in the morning. He will recommend Susan Delacroix, one of the most respected family rights attorneys in Manhattan. She'll take the case through a nonprofit called Justice for Mothers. You will pay $60 a month for 2 years. That is their rule. No one defends a mother's rights for free, because free makes the mother feel indebted. You will pay, but you will pay with your own hands." Sophia nodded. Alessandro stepped out onto the landing and closed the door softly behind him. The Astoria night was cold and quiet in the middle of November. Inside the old 4-story building, a woman had just refused an entire empire's offer to protect her in the dark, so that she could raise a child who might one day grow up in the light. Susan Delacroix kept her office on the 12th floor of an old building in Lower Manhattan, 1 block from Foley Square. She was 63 years old, with short silver hair, black-rimmed glasses, and a plain gray suit she had worn some version of every working day for 20 years, not for lack of money, but because she had learned early on that judges did not trust family rights attorneys who dressed expensively. Sophia met her on a Tuesday morning. Susan read through the summons envelope in 45 minutes without speaking a single word. Then she set the papers down on the desk with both palms flat on top of them. "Ms. Delgado, this is not a difficult case. This is a frightened man, trying to look dangerous. We are going to prove that with evidence, not with feeling. We are going to win with the truth. Do you understand me?" Sophia nodded. "And about Mr. Moretti, I need you to understand this part. He may be present in the courtroom. He may sit in the back row. But he will not speak. He is not permitted to speak. This is your fight. He is there only because you have chosen to have him there." Sophia nodded again. For 3 weeks of preparation, Susan worked like a mechanic, no emotion, only detail. She pulled Daniel Price's banking records from 3 different states. She requested written statements from 3 former landlords. She gathered his credit history, small claims court appearances, and employment records that showed him fired from 3 jobs over the last 7 years for petty theft and unexplained absences. Meanwhile, Sophia built her case simply by living her life. She worked every shift. She walked to Emma's school each afternoon. She cooked dinner in the small kitchen in Astoria. No incidents, no changes, nothing new for Daniel to grasp at. Emma was prepared by a children's therapist. Susan trusted Alice Whitmore, 70 years old, who had spent her entire career inside family courtrooms. Alice did not ask Emma a single question about Daniel. She only taught the little girl 3 things: tell the truth, keep the answers short, and don't strain to remember what isn't there to remember. Emma drew a picture in each of the 2 sessions: 3 stick figures under a red crayon roof. 1 small figure, 2 tall ones. No names underneath. Alice slid both drawings carefully into a separate folder. They might be evidence, they might not. That was for the judge to decide. In the meantime, Alessandro kept his promise. No call to Ettore Falcone. No private meeting with Daniel. No pressure, of any kind. Only the attorney's fee paid through the non-profit, the public distance maintained, and Sophia allowed to lead. Marco Ricci did not understand it at first. "Boss, we could clear this up in 24 hours. Alessandro looked out the study window at the flat gray November sky over Central Park. "She doesn't want it that way. And she is right." Marco was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. He had served Alessandro for 8 years, and he had never once heard the boss say she is right, not about anyone, ever. The night before the hearing, Sophia sat on the front step of her Astoria walk-up. Alessandro arrived without asking to come inside. He simply sat down beside her on the cold granite step, 2 paper coffee cups from the corner bodega balanced carefully in his hands. A late autumn night in New York. No rain. The street lamps cast a soft, tired yellow across the old brick sidewalk. The granite step was cold beneath them. Alessandro handed Sophia the paper cup. She took it in both hands, as much for the warmth as for the coffee. For 10 minutes, neither of them spoke. They did not need to. There is a kind of quiet between 2 adults who have learned enough about each other to stop filling the silences. At last, Sophia spoke. "He will lose tomorrow. I know that. Susan's evidence is strong. My story is true. But there is a part of me, a small part, that is afraid. Not afraid of losing. Afraid of the moment the judge looks at Emma and decides. Afraid of Emma having to walk into a judge's chambers alone. Afraid of her growing up remembering this day. Afraid that tomorrow is not an ending, only the beginning of something worse." Alessandro did not answer at once. He looked down into his coffee. 6 years ago, I sat in a car in Sicily. Beside me was a man I had to decide what to do with. It was the first decision I had to make after my father died. I did not want to make it, but I made it. And what I regret is not that I made it. What I regret is that I had no one sitting beside me to say there is another way. Sophia looked at him. "Do you want me to tell you there is another way?" "No, you already did. 4 nights ago, in that apartment. I am thanking you." Sophia was quiet. Then she set her cup down on the step. She reached into the pocket of her coat and pulled out a yellow sticky note. Its edges already softened and faded the small square Emma had written in her second week at the estate. "You should smile more. I found it in your wallet when I folded your vest for the laundry last time. I didn't say anything then. But I wanted you to know I saw it." Alessandro laughed softly, honestly, for the first time in weeks. Not a polite laugh, a real one. "How many times have you read it?" "Enough to remember." Sophia placed the sticky note gently back into his coat pocket. Then she reached into her own pocket for something else. The silver crucifix. She held it out to him. "You keep it tomorrow." "Not for me, for Emma. My grandmother gave it to me when I was 9. She told me it protected me on the days I could not protect myself. Tomorrow I have Susan to protect me. But Emma needs something to carry into that judge's chambers." Alessandro took the crucifix. Small, thin, warm from her hand. He nodded. "I'll give it to her in the morning, before she goes in. And I'll tell her whose hand it came from." Sophia nodded. Then, after a long silence, she leaned her shoulder gently against his. Not an embrace, only a lean. Alessandro did not move. Above them, the street lamps hummed. A single yellow leaf drifted from the maple across the avenue and landed at their feet. Somewhere far off, a subway train rattled beneath Queens. On an Astoria street in the last dark of November, a New York crime lord and a single mother sat beside each other on the front step of an old apartment building, waiting in silence for the dawn of the day that would decide the rest of 3 lives. The family courtroom for the Manhattan district was smaller than Sophia had imagined. Old walnut paneling, fluorescent light, a room built for ordinary decisions with extraordinary consequences. The radiator ticked softly in one corner. The clerk shuffled papers with a rhythm that made the silence heavier, not lighter. Alessandro sat in the second row from the back, close enough for Sophia to know he was there, careful enough not to draw attention that did not belong to him. Marco sat beside him in a gray suit, rather than the guard's black. Emma waited in the small side chamber down the hall with Alice Whitmore, the silver crucifix tucked safely into the pocket of her gray wool cardigan. Daniel Price arrived in a suit that fit him the way a costume fits an actor. Marcus Grayson was at his shoulder with a leather portfolio, opening with a confident, well-rehearsed statement about an unexpected health crisis on the mother's side and a father finally stepping up to accept his responsibility. He spoke of questionable associations with organized figures and hinted at the possibility of a child being drawn into an unsafe environment. He did not name Alessandro. He did not have to. The entire room already knew. For the first 10 minutes, it almost sounded believable. Then Susan Delacroix stood. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She walked Daniel Price through 5 years of silence, one question at a time, until his composure began to crack at the edges. "Mr. Price, would you tell the court when was the last time you sent your daughter a birthday card?" Daniel could not remember. "When was the last time you phoned to ask how she was doing in school?" He had no answer. "When was the last time you saw your daughter in person?" When she was very small." "Could you be more specific? How old was she then?" Daniel was silent. "You do not remember." Susan let the sentence hang in the air for 3 full seconds. Then she asked the question the entire courtroom knew would end the case. "And why now, Mr. Price? Why this particular month, the same month in which Miss Delgado's hospital stay became briefly, publicly connected to the name of a wealthy man? And why has every filing you have submitted requested full financial disclosure from Mr. Moretti and not one of them requested visitation rights, your daughter's school schedule, or her medical history?" Daniel had no answer that survived that question. He did not, in fact, ever recover. After Susan sat down, the judge, the Honorable Beatrice Halloran, 68 years old, 27 years on the family bench, asked to speak privately with Emma in her chambers. No attorneys. Emma walked into the small room carrying the bottle of water and the box of colored pencils Alice had given her. She came out 20 minutes later holding a piece of paper she had drawn while they talked. 3 stick figures under a red crayon roof. 1 small figure, 2 tall ones. Beneath them, in her careful, uneven hand, us. Judge Halloran held the drawing for a long moment, not allowing it to outweigh evidence, but not pretending it did not exist either. Then she laid it down on the bench in front of her, looked up over the tops of her reading glasses, and began to read her ruling. Judge Halloran spoke in a steady, unhurried voice. "The court finds no credible evidence that the child is at risk in the care of her mother. Quite the opposite. The petitioner has demonstrated a pattern of absence, not concern. This filing appears to have followed his awareness of a change in the mother's circumstances, not any change in his daughter's welfare. The court further notes that the petitioner has not provided a single dollar of child support in 6 years, despite being able-bodied and employable. The petition for emergency custody is denied with prejudice. Full physical and legal custody remains with the mother. The court further orders the petitioner to pay the respondent's attorney's fees." The gavel came down once, then again, sharp and final. Daniel's chair scraped hard against the floor as he stood. His attorney was already gathering papers, avoiding every pair of eyes on his way out. Sophia sat motionless for a beat, as though the words needed a little more time to become real. Then her shoulders sank all at once. The tension of many weeks left her body in a single long breath. Alessandro stepped forward 2 paces. He rested his hand briefly on her shoulder. Nothing more than that. Nothing more was needed. Emma came running in from the side chamber. Alice had allowed her out once the ruling was read and threw her arms around her mother. Sophia lifted her, held her tightly, and for the first time in many months allowed herself to laugh out loud, right there in the middle of the courtroom. Out in the corridor, Susan shook Sophia's hand. "You won. But the hardest part begins now, living a life without needing to prove yourself to anyone. Not to him, not to yourself, not even to the man standing at the end of that hallway waiting for you." Sophia looked. Alessandro was standing at the end of the corridor. He was not smiling. He was not walking toward her. He was only there with the patience of a man who had learned that some moments belonged to other people, and that he was not permitted to step into them uninvited. Sophia carried Emma toward him. When she reached him, Alessandro lowered himself onto one knee to be level with her daughter. Emma opened her palm. Inside were the silver crucifix and a folded piece of paper. "You held onto the cross for a long time." Alessandro laughed. "I'm sorry. You're right. This one is for you." Emma handed him the folded paper, not the drawing from the judge's chambers, but a second one she had made while she waited. 3 stick figures, this time holding hands. Beneath them, in careful little print, "For ale." Alessandro received the drawing with both hands. He folded it carefully. He slid it into the inside pocket of his coat, close to his chest. "I'll have it framed. Is that all right?" Emma nodded, serious. Sophia looked between the 2 of them and did not speak. She did not need to. Some things about the shape of a family are decided in a small corridor outside a family court, without anyone reading a legal document aloud. Meanwhile, in a dim, poorly lit bar off Queens Boulevard, Daniel Price ordered his 3rd whiskey. Beside him on the counter lay a fresh business card, not from an attorney, from a man who sold weapons out of a machine shop in Astoria. In the 3 weeks that followed the ruling, Daniel Price fell apart the way a man falls apart when he has staked everything on a bluff and lost. Marcus Grayson returned his retainer minus fees. His landlord gave him 2 months to vacate his studio apartment in Astoria, the same neighborhood as Sophia and Emma, 7 blocks away. a fact he had never once thought to consider as a mercy. The part-time job he held at a warehouse in Long Island City was terminated when he stopped showing up for shifts. The court-ordered attorney's fee $11,000 arrived by certified mail. He tore the envelope in half without opening it and threw both pieces into the sink. In Daniel's mind, which was eroding quickly, Alessandro Moretti had taken everything from him. Not Sophia, not Emma. Sophia and Emma had never been his to lose. But the opportunity to extort, the opportunity to leverage, the opportunity to disappear with $1 million in an offshore account that had been his, and it had been taken from him. He bought a used Beretta from a black market seller behind a machine shop in Astoria. He paid $3,000 in cash, the last money he had. He did not know how to shoot, but he did not need to know how to shoot well. He only needed to get close enough. Meanwhile, at the Moretti estate, life had found a new rhythm. Sophia and Emma still lived in the Astoria apartment. Sophia's decision on that point had not changed, but 3 times a week, mother and daughter had dinner with Alessandro in the small second-floor dining room. Emma usually fell asleep between the main course and dessert. Alessandro would lift her gently and carry her up to the small guest suite on the 3rd floor that Rosa had quietly prepared for the 2 of them for the nights they stayed over. Emma had begun calling him Ale, not uncle, not father, just Ale. Alessandro did not correct her. Marco Ricci had rearranged the morning security rotation 4 men now instead of 2. He did not tell Alessandro why. Alessandro did not ask. Both of them understood that there are men who lose in a courtroom and do not yet know how to walk out of their own lives. Marco had also asked Sophia for permission to send a guard with Emma to school in the mornings only for 1 month, only until the situation settled. Sophia agreed once Marco explained the reason. Emma was told that Uncle Enzo, a 30-year-old Sicilian bodyguard with 2 small children of his own at home, was a friend of her mother and Ale, and would be walking her to school for a few weeks. Emma accepted this cheerfully. She liked Enzo because he could lift her onto his shoulders in a single easy motion. What no one at the estate knew was this. Daniel Price had been watching Sophia for 3 weeks. He knew her shift hours. He knew the location of Emma's school. He knew that Emma came to the Moretti estate on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday afternoons. And he knew that every morning, Alessandro walked Emma and Sophia to the front gate before the Bentley pulled away. Friday morning, the 4th week after the ruling, no rain. The blue-gray sky of a late autumn New York day. The old Chevrolet whose plates Daniel had switched sat parked across the avenue from the Moretti estate exactly 90 meters from the front gate. 7:28 in the morning. The iron gate swung open. Alessandro stepped out beside Sophia and Emma. Sophia was wearing the white shearling coat Rosa had given her for Christmas. Emma had on a red wool hat and was carrying her small frozen backpack. Marco stood at Alessandro's right, near the SUV whose engine was already idling. Enzo opened the rear passenger door for Emma. 90 meters up the avenue, in the old Chevrolet, Daniel Price crouched low over the wheel. In the palm of his hand was the Beretta. He had told himself he would shoot Alessandro. Only Alessandro, no one else. But as his fingers closed around the grip, his heart hammered so violently that he could not tell what he would hit if he fired. He pushed open the door. He stepped onto the sidewalk. No one noticed him until Sophia glanced across the avenue and saw the flash of metal catch the pale New York morning light. Alessandro. Time stretched. Sophia did not think. She did not calculate. She had spent 7 years living for the sole purpose of protecting one small person, and the instinct did not need to be retrained. She threw herself in front of Alessandro and wrapped her arms around him. Crack. The gunshot rang out across 5th Avenue, a sound that did not belong to this address. The bullet passed through Sophia's shoulder and buried itself in the stone wall behind them. She collapsed in Alessandro's arms directly in front of the gate. Red bloomed across the white shearling. Emma screamed. Enzo scooped her off the ground and had her inside the SUV with the door shut before the second of 2 seconds had passed. A bodyguard's instinct to shield a child overriding even the instinct to fight. Marco Ricci had broken from his position before the echo of the shot had died. Within 3 seconds, 3 other guards had poured from the estate. Within 6, Daniel Price was face down on the sidewalk with the Beretta kicked into the storm drain and one guard's pistol pressed to the back of his skull, waiting only for the word. Alessandro was on his knees, holding Sophia. His white shirt was already soaked through. His eyes were no longer the eyes of a boss. They were the eyes of a man who had stood in the presence of every kind of danger in his life and had only just met the one thing that could frighten him. Rosa, call the ambulance now. Marco, she is not to speak. No one is to make her speak. Sophia's eyes half opened. Her hand searched for the front of his coat. Don't. Alessandro understood. He drew the pistol from the holster beneath his arm. a sidearm he had carried every day for 12 years and had never once drawn for a personal reason. He stood. He walked to the place where Daniel lay pinned to the concrete. "Shoot him," he said to the guards. But Sophia clung, from the ground, to the hem of his coat. "Please, don't, Emma. She cannot grow up remembering that her mother watched you kill her father in front of the gate of her house. There are men who have built empires on the belief that they can protect what they love. And then there are the moments when love steps in front of them anyway, and teaches them that protection was never something one person could carry alone." Alessandro's fist clenched. A vein rose on his temple. Slowly, he lowered the pistol. "Tie him. Hand him to the police. Do not let him die easily." Marco nodded. Handcuffs clicked. Alessandro lifted Sophia into the SUV. He would not wait for the ambulance and drove himself, at a speed that terrified even Marco, all the way to Mount Sinai. The surgery lasted 5 hours. The bullet was removed cleanly. Sophia lost 2 units of blood, but she lived. Alessandro sat in the corridor outside the operating room in a suit still soaked with her blood. He refused to change, refused to let anyone touch him. Emma sat beside him, both small hands wrapped around the silver crucifix he had returned to her the morning of the hearing. Rosa carried up 2 paper cups of coffee. Neither of them drank a sip. When the surgeon finally stepped out through the swinging doors and said the words, "She is stable, she will wake in about 2 hours," Alessandro lowered himself and pulled Emma into his arms. It was the first time he had truly embraced her, and Emma began to sob the way a 6-year-old is allowed to sob when she has finally been given permission to be a child again. "Is Mommy going to be okay, Ale? She's not going to die, is she? Your mother is all right. Your mother is going to be all right. I promise." 3 months later, the garden of the Moretti estate at the end of a late spring afternoon. The magnolia tree that Alessandro's father had planted 40 years earlier, the tree Elena, his mother, had loved above every other flower on the grounds, was in full bloom. The grass was green. Late golden light fell through the leaves in slow, moving squares. Marco Ricci, Rosa, Aldo Bianchi, Susan Delacroix, and the 12 most trusted members of the Moretti household stood in a small, quiet arc beneath the largest magnolia. Enzo held his own toddler son on one hip. Camille Voss carried a small notebook, ready for the paperwork of a different ceremony, the formal one that would come in summer, with a priest and every legal seal in place. But today was only a promise, offered inside the family, without press, without heavy ceremony. Emma wore a white dress and carried a small bouquet of wildflowers she and Rosa had gathered together from the back garden that morning. Sophia wore a pale blue dress. If she tilted her chin, the small pink scar under her collarbone still showed. Alessandro had gently offered to have a thin lace panel added to cover it. She had refused. "I want to remember. I want Emma to remember. This is part of who we are." Alessandro stood beneath the magnolia with a small olive wood box in his hand, the same box Emma had once seen inside his study on a Thursday afternoon. He did not kneel with drama. He only opened the lid. The emerald in his mother's ring caught the last of the sun, green as the hope Emma had once named it. "I spent nearly my entire life believing that power was the only language worth learning. You taught me another one, a language my father never knew, and my mother did not have enough time to teach me. The language of opening a door for a 6-year-old girl who walked in through it, and of letting her rewrite an entire dynasty. There are men who are born into power. There are men who earn it, and there are men only a few who learn the harder truth, that the day you no longer need to prove your strength is the day someone finally trusts you enough to hand you their whole world." Sophia did not wait for him to finish. She smiled the easy smile she had slowly learned to smile again over 3 months of recovery, unguarded, unbraced, for the next bad thing. "Yes." Emma shrieked with joy and threw herself into the middle of the embrace. Rosa dabbed at her eyes with the handkerchief she had carried for exactly this purpose. A soft rain began to fall, not the gray rain of the previous autumn, but the gentle rain of a New York spring, the kind that felt like a blessing instead of a warning. On the wall of Alessandro's study, beside the Caravaggio, 3 humble things were now framed side by side. Emma's drawing labeled "For Ale," the small yellow sticky note that read, "You should smile more," and, resting on a small carved wooden shelf, a single, clean plastic spray bottle from a Tuesday morning that had changed the course of 3 lives. "Dear friends, thank you so much for staying with this story all the way to the end. This story is a work of fiction, told for entertainment and inspiration, but the feelings behind it are real. Sometimes the most powerful thing in the world is not a weapon, and not a fortune. It is a 6-year-old girl who walks through a door she was never supposed to open, and quietly changes every life inside the room." If this story reminded you that kindness can survive in the strangest places, that the small choices we make on ordinary Tuesday mornings can shape entire lifetimes, please take a moment right now to hit the like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the emotional stories we bring you every single day. We would truly love to hear from you. Which moment touched your heart the most? Was it the courage of a little girl carrying a spray bottle into a place she did not belong? Was it Sophia's quiet strength, a mother who chose the light for her daughter even when the darkness was offered to her freely? Was it the moment Alessandro lowered the gun because love asked him to? And in your own life, has there ever been a small act of kindness, from a stranger or a child, that quietly changed the direction of your days? Please share your thoughts and your own story in the comments. We read every single one, and each of your words means more to our team than you know. From all of us, we wish you good health, peace in your home, and a heart that stays open even on the difficult days. May your family be safe, may your children be brave, and may kindness always find its way back to you. Thank you for spending this time with us. Stay hopeful, stay kind, and we will see you again in the next story.